As we explore, it's a perfect song to set up the topic today of humility causes spiritual growth as we continue our exploration of the 12 steps of AA combined with the 12 promises of AA, throwing in the 12 principles, 12 spiritual principles of New Thought, along with 12 action steps. And today we focus on the spiritual principle of this step, which is humility. And perhaps one of the greatest things is to understand that someone can love you unconditionally, and the times in our life that maybe we haven't been grateful for that love from another. And that another could be a special, significant person in our life. It could be a family member, it could be a parent, it could be a relationship, a husband, a wife, a partner, it could be our children, and it could be God. It could be God. And how many times have we perhaps gone in our life believing that we weren't loved unconditionally by another, and then to find out that, you know what, all those thoughts that I carried with me each day, each week, each year, that I had led myself to believe, and maybe I even shared those thoughts trying to get others to believe the same thing that I did about how others didn't love me, I find out that they did love me unconditionally. Oh, is that a humbling experience? Anybody ever been humbled like that? And you know what sometimes stops us from being humbled is our pride. Oh well, they didn't really love us. And we make all these excuses. How many times has our pride got us in the way of our healing, of our moving forth, of our shifting, of our being humble? So today we're going to look at what exactly is humility and how can it actually, by practicing, cause spiritual growth within us. Because a lot of times, I think when we hear the word humility, we get confused and think it means humiliated. No, it doesn't. We're not talking about putting down, shaming someone or making them feel less than. Humility, as defined, is modesty, respectfulness, humbleness, an unassuming nature, or my favorite, a gentleness of spirit. That's what humility is. But I do love the humor that Margaret Halsey had in her book, Malice Towards Some, when she writes, "Humility is not my forte, and whenever I dwell for any length of time on my own shortcomings, they gradually begin to seem mild, harmless, rather engaging little things, not at all like the staring defects in other people's characters." Have you ever thought, well, you know, I'm not as bad as them? So that spiritual principle of humility, as we look at step 7 of AA, is humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. And step 7 really works in tandem, in partnership with step 6, which is a reminder of what we went through last month, was we're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. But when we're willing to have our defects of character removed, we want to do it in a humble way, not going, God, fix me. God, do it right now. Just make me all better. It's doing it through that humbleness. And what these steps may sound is very self-explanatory. But being entirely ready to have God remove all our character defects and humbly asking our higher power to remove our shortcomings can be difficult because our pride wants to get in the way, and then we throw in a little self-help or a lot of self-help or way too much self-help, and we begin to believe that we have no shortcomings at all. No flaws. None. We're good. But you see, what I want you to keep understanding is that when we have a humble approach and we can look at what are our shortcomings and strengthen them, that's what improves our character, our personality, our beingness, our spirit. We become more ripened, stronger by looking at our shortcomings, not by ignoring them and convincing ourselves that they aren't present. Just ask those closest to you if they agree with that thought 100%. That's how you know. Does everybody go, wow, second coming? Before you walk into the room, do they say, it's coming? And a second later, you come. Second coming. That was good. On the spot, baby. You make up something better. So that second, unless we're walking around with that 100% Christ consciousness, we may have a shortcoming to examine in our life. And I challenged you last week to go around and ask the 5 closest people that you respect the most to ask if you have any shortcomings. How many of us did that? I don't want to know what they are. How many of us do not want to know what our shortcomings are? But yet we keep projecting them and carrying them into our life. Do you know what a pain in the ass it is to live with you? True? True? I see the couples here thinking, man, I'd like to make a list. Here. Shortcomings. What I want you to say is when we have humility, it's okay to have shortcomings. I have plenty. Come visit with me. I'll tell you every one of them. And you know what? I'm trying to improve them. If you ever played a round of golf with me, I'm always trying to improve and get better at my game, even though I've been doing it for 38 years. I have played thousands of rounds of golf. Thousands. And I'm always trying to get better. Does that mean I'm not a good golfer? No, just ask Crystal's dad. He had to pay. But we're always trying to get better. It doesn't mean that we're screwed up right where we're at. Do they talk like this in Edmonton? We have guests here from Edmonton here. I just want to find out if they talk like that in Edmonton. Edmonton. Got my pickup truck out front. Cowboy hat. They don't drive around with their guns in the back seat. They just put it underneath the seat. That's in the States. Life has a way of showing us our character defects. True? Life is your mirror. If you could read honestly and in a humble perspective, what is the mirror of life reflecting back to you about your character defects? Any? Or is it saying, man, you got it? Perfect, you got it mastered. You're done. That we need to change. We are surrounded by, I want you to hear this part though. This is where I want to be serious for a moment. We are surrounded by a consciousness. That consciousness is the sum total of our thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions, behaviors. That consciousness is also the consciousness of the divine energy that created this thing called Earth, that created this thing called our solar system, that created this thing called the Milky Way, and the other 200 billion galaxies. That's the consciousness that we are always surrounded by. You have never acted, thought, had an experience outside of that consciousness, and it knows everything that you know. Do you understand it? You can never hide from that consciousness. Never. You can go in your room in the smallest little space, turn out the lights, and hide in there and be a silent. It still knows you're there, baby. You cannot hide from this consciousness. Do you understand that? That becomes your mirror. And it knows every thought that you have had before this lifetime, during this lifetime, and after this lifetime. Now, when we own and understand that fully, we start to go, wow, maybe there's some shifting in my life that I need to look at and examine. And so we are surrounded by a consciousness that knows every area of our heart, thoughts, emotion, and most importantly, our life's history. See, we may not have never shared our entire history with another person. That's possible. Even though we've been encouraging you this year to share your life history with at least one other. But there's one place that knows your entire life history. Your entire life history, and that's the sum total of that consciousness that we call Spirit God. The love, beauty, the holy mystery, the divine intelligence, creation itself. You can't hide from this. You can't hide any part of your history from this. Currently, is there anything in your life history then that needs changing, healing, work on, improvement? Because what I want you to understand, every time a shortcoming appears in your life, perhaps it really is nothing more than history repeating itself. You may also need a touch of emotional healing when it comes to trust in someone else's control again. and require a progressive learning to trust God again. And that's what I'm learning here in this culture that we have here in Victoria, is that the trust in God has wavered greatly in our community. Because often I find when people are struggling, the thing they do is they go away from God. And when they're feeling better, then they come back. And so what is it that has caused us not to trust the thing that gives us breath, the thing that gives us sunshine? What is it that has gone on in our history that has caused us not to be willing to trust the thing that has brought you into this form in existence, the thing that holds your 30 to 50 trillion cells alike, the thing that has made every human being that has ever lived, is living, will live, 99.5% exactly alike, inarguable, and that has managed to create enough variation that in the 0.5%, no two human beings have ever been exactly alike, have ever thought the same thing, have ever acted the same way, thank God, because it would be a boring place. And has created that much uniqueness within us all, and that we're hesitant to trust it. Do you know how much intelligence it takes to be able to make your internal organs all function together? Just visit with a doctor. My wife's dad, that was been here the last 4 days, been a physician for 42 years. Listen to how, I love listening to how he talks about and relates how all the different internal organs all function together. There's no computer, there's no human being that's been able to master that, figure it out, recreate it. Impossible. And we're afraid to trust that with our healing? Really? Really? So do we humbly approach that eternal essence? Kind of wound up today. Roots to distrust. So learning to trust again, God again, to overcome old emotional roots of distrust toward authority figures. How many of us are repeating the history of at 8 years old or 10 years old because we couldn't trust our father? And so we think that's still God. And then we come into churches and I'm everybody's father. So you automatically can't trust me because I'm a male. I have a deep voice. And I'm from America. Drive pickup trucks, cowboy hats. We have all been hurt by the effects of wrongdoing in the world. And some of us have mistakenly blamed God for the bad things that have happened to us or to those that we love. We might say, well, God let it happen, and that's why I'm mad. Humans are all given a choice to either choose good or bad in life. You understand we have that choice over animals. Do you understand that? And oftentimes we choose bad because it's easier. And many people get hurt by our poor choices. And if you wonder, oh, no, that's not so, just look at the riots that took place in Vancouver a few weeks ago. How many people actually stood up? There were a few, and that was huge. How many stood back and did nothing? You understand when you stand back and do nothing in that type of setting, you are participating in the bad. Because without that presence there, that energy doesn't happen. People just don't decide. It's drawn. When we have mob mentality, it's because they're drawing on those around us from the crowd. That's proven. Those people wouldn't have done the same thing if that street had been abandoned. They were doing it because there was strength in numbers. And how few actually could stand up. So when you say, no, it's easy to choose good. I always choose good. Yeah? Put yourself in those type of situations. Which would you have chosen? Might have chosen to laugh and do nothing. But the ones that stood in front, that's why it's hard to do good. Hard to do good. Strength. So it's easy to want to say that it is best that we honest our feelings about God, that we're honest about our feelings about God and our distrust of authority, because those beliefs are there whether you acknowledge them or not. They are a part of our history. And they affect our lives whether we realize it or not. We must trust God in order to change at a spiritual level. See, if we don't believe God's existent in our life and we don't want to trust it, God's what it's caused is the foundation of our spiritual beingness. And if we don't trust it, how do we change? How do we shift? How do we heal then? So restoring your trust in God is critical to completing steps 6 and 7. Because without it, there is no way you can be entirely ready to have God remove all your defects of character or humbly ask Spirit to remove any of our shortcomings. So the question would be, if you completely trusted God, what would shift in your life if you trusted the power within you? What would shift? See, the reason we end up stuck with all of our negative character and personality defects and shortcomings is because we keep trying to fix them ourselves. We sit there like a little kid trying to untie a huge, tangled, tight knot in our shoelaces, which is a metaphor for our addictions, our bad behaviors, our unhealthy habits. While the parent, as the metaphor of God, stands there waiting to help us. But we keep saying, no, I'll get it. For 35 years. And we just keep waving the supreme intelligence of God away. I'll figure it out. I can handle it. I can master it. I can do it. Don't worry, I'll do it. But yet we're still repeating the history 20 years later. When we get frustrated enough with that knot, we may finally, in tears and exasperation, ask universal intelligence to help us. That means we're just broke down. Then we often will humbly approach God when we're just broke. When our relationships are broke, when our finances are broke, when our body's broke, and everything else is broke, then we'll open up to God. But then when it looks like we have made a little bit of progress, you know what we do? We push God away again and resume our struggle to untie our knot of addiction again. God is just waiting for you to finally understand from your heart that you cannot beat your addiction, unhealthy behaviors, bad habits on your own, and to surrender unconditionally so that our higher power can help us change. So I pose this question to you. What if all of our addictions, bad behaviors, and habits are really a path that brings us back to God? Have you ever met somebody that was a 20-year addict, hanging out on the streets? And they got to the other side of the mess and the hurt and the pain and the darkness, and they got healed? Man, are they deep of faith. Give me a person that's still struggling with it, and I'll show you a person that's shallow in faith. So what if what our addictions are about bringing us closer to God? What kind of a gift would they have been then in our life? Would they have been good or bad then? Or would they have been perhaps the greatest present that we've ever had the opportunity to open and experience fully? Most character defects come from lies that we have believed as children about ourselves, others, and God. We develop deep roots of fear and selfishness because of these false truths, and we try to meet all our own needs in life because of them. The problem is, God created us to work in a partnership, in a co-creative process. And in order for compassion, kindness, and love to be extended from one to another, what needs to take place? God needs us to be the delivery people, to be the delivery person, to help ourselves and to help others grow spiritually in life. See, is there compassion if I'm with another person and they're expecting compassion from me, and I know that I draw that compassion from that higher intelligence that I'm a part of, but it's from there that I source my ability to be compassionate. Now, if I step away and leave a void, is there any compassion there for that person? No, so what are we? We are working in a co-creative process, in a co-partnership with God to be the one that delivers compassion, that delivers unconditional love in human form. God can't deliver compassion in human form without you. God cannot be humble without you. God cannot be joyful without you. So that is our opportunity here to express that goodness in all forms. We are partnering with God. How have we done on that partnership in our life? Or is there something that's gone on in our history that says we are not worthy, we are not deserving to be partners in God in expressing compassion, love, empathy, kindness, joy, goodness in our lives? And if so, then that's what we need to heal. That's what we need to heal. I was thinking to myself, while we were listening to Gina Soleil's song, The One I Need, The One I Love Lives Inside of You. I was wondering how many of us have the chatter going on inside saying, God doesn't love me. That's not really true. Those are nice words. That's not really true. God doesn't really. How many of us may have had a word or two of that chatter? And all I could think of, too, while I was sitting there is just the other day I was sitting down at the Chinese cemetery, my power place in nature. I hope all of you in this beautiful city that we live in have a power place in nature where you go to feel something more than yourself. Mine is the Chinese cemetery off of Ross Road. And as I'm sitting there, I'm looking out at this beautiful ocean and the San Juan Straits there. Is that right? Yeah. And the states on the other side, and the ships coming in. And I'm thinking, my God, this is my God. Now, how do we humbly approach that? How we miss it is we just walk and we go, oh, isn't this nice to be here? I wonder who's laying there, and we miss it. That's not humbly approaching God. How many moments like that do we miss? Because we're caught up in the doingness and beingness of life and the busyness. So when God takes you back to the original root lie that we have told ourselves, meaning I don't deserve this, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not great enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. Those are the root lies that we've sometimes embodied in our life, and especially the one that I can only trust in myself to protect myself and meet my own needs. I want you to hear that one again, because boy, does that drive a lot of people. I can only trust in myself to protect myself and meet my own needs. Meaning you don't believe, because often that comes from one or both of our parents didn't meet our emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual needs. And so what we had to do become is self-reliant on ourselves to only meet that we were only capable of meeting our needs. So then we grow up and we never grow out of those habits. And so we stay immature as an adult. And that means that all we really care about is making sure that our needs are met first before anyone else. And then we move into a family. And we forget that our family have needs to meet. And we're not sure how to meet our family's needs because our needs didn't get met. So all we know is to make sure that our needs get met, number one. Number one. And that is a lie. That is a lie that we've told ourselves. If you think God can't meet your needs, pride, again, is in your way of healing, and that's a shortcoming. Then universal intelligence can deal with the fruit of what that lie is, producing on the tree of your life. Creation does this by helping you to not only understand that lie, the lie that is working in you, but to replace that lie with the truth of our Creator. Harm and damage are caused in our life from unhealthy behaviors that are committed either by us or to us, directly or indirectly. It is never God's fault, so a common shortcoming is to be mad at God, to distrust God, to blame God, or to hold grudges against her because of the bad things that have happened to us. God wants to turn our messes into a message that can help others. And how we do this is by examining our shortcomings with a humble attitude. So the first quote I want to put up on the screen is simply this. Humility is often mistakenly interpreted as someone with low self-esteem who grovels in codependent behavior about every criticism that comes their way. Have you ever had that? Somebody gives you a little criticism. Like, that's why we won't ask people that we respect the most around us for what do you see as our 1 to 5 shortcomings? Because we can't take the criticism. We think it's criticism. You'll never get better by only focusing on everything that you do good. You've got to focus on your weaknesses and strengthen them. You can never become a complete golfer, a complete salesperson, a complete chef without focusing on what you're not good at. So some of the character defects that we have brought up to teach ourselves as the lies that we have lived from in our personal life history is self-pity. We've addressed that one a couple of weeks ago. Impatience, self-justification, resentment toward ourselves, towards others, towards God. Being self-important, hates, self-condemnation, enviousness, criticism, jealousy, negative thinking, laziness, vulgar or immoral thinking, lying, insensitive, gossiping, procrastination, selfishness, dishonesty, fear. Those are the shortcomings that we have bought into. And until we look at them and go, okay, wow, I do have fear of intimacy. I do have fear of success. Then I start to address it. When I start to change my behavior around it, then I've now taken that fear and turned it into a strength. Some people think that they're better than they really are, and some think that they're worse than they really are. That's what I found. Kind of this medium. Some think they're up here, some think they're down here. We must see ourselves in truth as God sees us. How do you think God sees us as human beings? Do you think he goes, oh, they're billionaires, they're better? Or they've given up everything, they're better. God sees us as all equals. As all equals. So we must see ourselves in truth as God sees us in order to be able to leave the dark room of delusion that we live in while practicing an unhealthy behavior, habit, or addiction, and to walk into the light of Spirit. Anytime we're practicing any of those unhealthy behaviors of any type, it's then that we're living in a delusion of darkness. And by ceasing those behaviors is what moves us into a greater awareness of the light. Goodness, happiness, joy, fun, easier to be around. Shortcomings are just ways that we fail and come up short in life from the regular standards and expectations that we or others have placed upon us. Running to an addiction in place of God is a shortcoming because we need to run to the answer and not just to another problem to try to fix our problems. Learning to trust God with a sincere and humble heart is a huge step for many of us on our journey to awakened wholeness. So let us be sure not to confuse humility with arrogance or cockiness, as this husband did in his relationship. After being married for 30 years, his wife asked him if he would please describe her. And he looked at her slowly and then said, "You are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. And she asked her husband, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "You're adorable, beautiful, cute, delightful, elegant, foxy, gorgeous, hot." She smiled happily and said, "Oh, that's so lovely. What about IJK?" He said, "I'm just kidding." His eye is still swollen, but it will get better. Slide number 2, the quote I want you to look at. True humility is just knowing the truth about what God really is and who you really are, and then accepting it from the heart. I can personally say that my personal quest for happiness has consumed me at times in my life. And I wanted to fulfill that void for happiness, regardless of who it may hurt in my pursuit of that happiness. When I was a little kid, everything seemed possible. As I got older, I found that it isn't exactly true. I can't really fly. Santa Claus might not land on my roof. Superman is not a career path. And the disappointments keep coming. The truth is, I might not become president. I might not sing in front of a sold-out crowd at Madison Square Garden. I might not play center field for the Dodgers. I'm definitely not going to be the second coming of the great one, Wayne Gretzky, or quarterback for the Cowboys or point guard for the Lakers. I probably won't be the host of The Tonight Show. Those years of growing up can be a cold splash of reality. Wonder becomes myth. Magic becomes magic tricks. Possible appears to become impossible. And then I became a father, and my life was transformed. 5 birds with good intentions are sitting on a line on a telephone wire. 2 decide to fly south. How many are left? Most people would say 3. Actually, all 5 are left. You see, deciding to fly isn't the same as doing it. If a bird really wants to go somewhere, it's got to point itself in the right direction, jump off the wire, flap its wings, and keep flapping until it gets there. So it is with most things. Good intentions aren't enough. It's not what we want, say, or think what makes things happen. It's what we do. I frequently think of writing thank you, birthday, and congratulatory notes. Unfortunately, only a sad few of these good sentiments ever make it to paper. Still, if I don't look too closely, I can delude myself into thinking that based on my good thoughts, I'm a gracious and grateful and humble person. A truer and less admirable picture of my character is drawn by my actions. In the end, we either do or don't do. We either make the time to do the things we want to or should do, or we make excuses. As Alfred Adler said, life happens at the level of events, not of words. Trust movement. What do we want to do? Do you want to take a course, change your job, lose weight, make new friends, or spend time with and appreciate more the ones you have? What's stopping you from jumping off the wire and flapping your wings? A shortcoming many of us have is confusing intentions, good intentions, with actions. How are we on that? Is that a shortcoming we have? Or are we humbly ready to say, you know what, here's what I've done a lot. Today I want to start doing better. To end with a simple prayer. I love this story. By Peggy Porter. My son Gilbert was 8 years old and had been in Cub Scouts only a short time. During one of his meetings, he was handed a sheet of paper, a block of wood, and 4 tires and told to return home and give it all to Dad. That was not an easy task for Gilbert to do. Dad was not receptive to doing things with his son, but Gilbert tried. Dad read the paper and scoffed at the idea of making a pine wood derby car with his younger, eager son. This block of wood remained untouched as the weeks passed by. Finally, Mom stepped in to see if I could figure this all out. The project began. Having no carpentry skills, I decided it would be best if I simply read the directions and let Gilbert do the work. And he did. I read aloud the measurements, the rules of what we could do and what we couldn't do. Within days, his block of wood was turned into a pine wood derby car. A little lopsided, but looking great, at least in the eyes of his mom. Gilbert had not seen any of the other kids' cars and was feeling pretty proud of his Blue Lightning Special. The pride that comes with knowing you did something on your very own. Then the big night came when his blue pinewood derby in his hand and pride in his heart, we headed to the big race. Once there, my little one's pride turned to humility. Gilbert's car was obviously the only car made entirely on his own. All the other cars were a father-son partnership with cool paint jobs and sleek body styles made for speed. A few of the boys giggled as they looked at Gilbert's lopsided, wobbly, unattractive vehicle. To add to the humility, Gilbert was the only boy without a man at his side. A couple of the boys who were from single-parent homes at least had an uncle or grandfather by their side. Gilbert had his mom. As the race began, it was done in elimination fashion. You kept racing as long as you were the winner. One by one, the cars raced down the finely sanded ramp. Finally, it was between Gilbert and the sleekest, fastest-looking car there. As the last race was about to begin, my wide-eyed, shy 8-year-old asked if they could stop the race for a minute because he wanted to pray. And the race stopped. Gilbert hit his knees, clutching his funny-looking block of wood between his hands. With a wrinkled brow, he set to converse with his father. He prayed in earnest for a very long minute and a half, and then he stood, smile on his face, and announced, "Okay, I'm ready." As the crowd cheered, a boy named Tommy stood with his father as their car sped down the ramp. Gilbert stood with his father within his heart and watched his block of wood wobble down the ramp with surprisingly great speed and rushed over the finish line a fraction of a second before Tommy's car did. Gilbert leaped into the air with a loud "thank you" as the crowd roared in approval. The scoutmaster came up to Gilbert with microphone in hand and asked the obvious question, "So you prayed to win, huh, Gilbert?" To which my young son answered, "Oh, no, sir, that wouldn't be fair to ask God to help you beat someone else. I just ask God to help it make it so I don't cry when I lose." Children seem to have wisdom far beyond us. Gilbert didn't ask God to win the race, didn't ask God to fix the outcome. Gilbert asked God to give him strength in the outcome. When Gilbert first saw the other cars, he didn't cry out to God, "No fair, they had a father's help." No, he went to God for strength. Perhaps we spend too much of our praying time asking God to rig the race, to make us number one, or too much time asking God to remove us from the struggle, when we should be seeking God's strength and humility to get through the struggle. From Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, it says, "I can do all things through him who gives me strength." Gilbert's simple prayer spoke volumes to those present that night. He never doubted that God would indeed answer his request. He didn't pray to win, thus hurt someone else. He prayed that God supply the grace to lose with dignity. Gilbert, by his stopping the race to speak to God, also showed the crowd that he wasn't there without a dad, but his father was most definitely there with him. Yes, Gilbert walked away a winner that night, and with God at his side. For he that places himself neither higher nor lower than he ought to exercises the truest of humility. Can humility cause any spiritual growth within you? Let us pray.